Hello and welcome to our video. Today we're going to talk about data privacy compliance automation with simplified zero-code deletion. My name is Noam Dror and I'm the VP of Solution Engineering at SecuPi. Let's start. Data privacy is becoming a human right. Many countries and regulatory bodies in the world are creating or evolving their privacy regulations. GDPR, CPRA, PIPEDA in Canada are all good examples of why regulation is important. Because of that, there is a need for organizations to create a technology automation to support the evolving requirements quickly, easily, and in a cost-effective manner. You can also see that consumers have different rights to access the data, rights to correct the data, rights to delete the data, rights to opt in and opt out of certain processing or sales. And then business have some obligations. For example, what are the defaults for the opt-in? What are the notice and transparency that they need to provide their consumers? What kind of risk assessments they do to make sure there are no breaches? And what is the purpose and processing limitation of data for those users? This is the main reason why we created the SecuPi data security platform. So SecuPi is a data security and privacy platform where you can do three things. One is have real-time visibility and classification of who's getting access to what data. We can monitor in real time what data is being accessed and by whom, what kind of data it is it sensitive, does it contain PII, is there any unusual behavior there using user behavior analytics, and of course help with getting more secure access using database passwordless access to those data stores. The second component of the SecuPi data security platform is fine-grained authorization. This is where we decide if a user can or cannot do something to that data. That can start with getting access to a database in general, going all the way to can you get access to a specific column or a row within a database. The third component of the SecuPi platform is the data de-identification, masking, encryption, and deletion. This is where we can change data with encryption, masking, tokenization, and we can actually delete it. We're going to talk about that in the next few slides. SecuPi is very serious about this, and that's why we are mentioned in over 40 Gartner reports and are part of different market segments, including data security platforms, data masking, and dynamic masking. So let's talk about how this thing works. This is a high-level architecture of the SecuPi platform. We have a centralized server where you can manage your policies regarding what to report, who gets access to what needs to be encrypted, what needs to be masked, what needs to be deleted. Those are in the policies. In order to make those policies easier, you might want to get information about the users from your identity management systems, your HR systems, your authentication systems, but you also want to get information about your data. That can be from your data catalog, from your data discovery tools, and from your data privacy tools. Once we have those policies and all those attributes, we can now send policies to the SecuPi enforcers in order for the enforcers to report about who gets access to what and what can be enforced within that environment. SecuPi has 5 different types of enforcers and a very comprehensive support capability platform. Those enforcers can start with SecuPi transparent gateways. So you point your application or your user to a gateway, and that gateway will report and enforce all access to the data stores. It can be SecuPi application enforcers and application database wrappers. It can also be SDKs, UDFs, callouts, ETL integration, and of course it can be the usage of native tools. SecuPi has comprehensive technical compliance coverage to answer privacy regulation and the need for sovereignty to stay within your location. Starting from discovery and classification, where we can find PII information, personal identifiable information, through user behavior analytics to find out unusual behavior and monitor that, going through monitoring and auditing of every access to private data, going through dynamic consent control to dynamic data masking and soft and hard deletion. To comply with the right to be forgotten, we have three different options that can be used independently or together. The first one is what we call a logical deletion. In a logical deletion, the data stays in the database, but no user can access it. For example, if I have a user that was asked to be forgotten, we either won't see that user at all, or that user's data would be completely masked. So in this case, you see X's and 9s. That's here in example number 1. After a period of time, you can actually go to what we call physical anonymization. Physical anonymization is where we go into the database itself and change the data to mask it. We leave the primary and foreign keys for integrity, but we change the data so no one can actually see it in the database itself. The third option is actual deletion of those records from the database. All those can be gradual and be configured separately, or one after another. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to show you a demo that shows exactly those three options. So how does it work? When we use logical deletion, the data stays within the data source. So John Smith and his ID will be there. But when the user requests information about that user, the user will not be there. That's the logical aspect of it. So in the data flow process, you will see nothing. Within physical deletion or physical anonymization or masking, we actually change the data in the database. And we do it very, very carefully. One of our customers is Priceline. They use the SecuPi solution to delete records across hundreds of data sources. Those includes SQL data stores such as Oracle, DB2, SQL Server, MySQL, and others. NoSQL stores such as MongoDB, and API-based solutions such as Google Analytics, applications, and deletion support. We also help them delete information within files such as Parquet, Avro, XML, CSV, and JSON files. We also integrate with OneTrust in order to do a workflow from a DISA request all the way to the deletion, with full traceability and auditability of every deletion or de-identification action. So, to summarize what SecuPi is doing for privacy. So SecuPi is doing a good job at retention and DISA-based deletion. First, we integrate with data catalogs such as Collibra and Deletion. We integrate with OneTrust for right to be forgotten request. We integrate with Big ID in order to understand their discovery and how a user is reflected in multiple databases, and of course with other solutions. Second, we provide central workflow and deletion orchestration platform. This can be integrated with OneTrust, ServiceNow, and other GRC platform. Third, we have full traceability. That means we take a very good care of the deletion process. And in any case something goes wrong, we can always roll back. Fourth is the complexity of deletion. That can be pretty complex with primary keys, foreign keys, unique column constraint. We can handle that complexity. Fifth is all around the complexity of legacy systems. Some systems are not a good fit for deletion. In that case, you may want to do masking. When you do that masking, you want to make sure you preserve the same format of data in the database as it used to be before you change that data. For example, if you have a social security number, you need to put a different social security number that would make sense to that database and application. 6, we can connect through common APIs to different SaaS platforms. And 7, we can delete data from files, structured files such as Parquet, JSON, XML, and CSV. So now, let's see how SecuPi implements the options for right to be forgotten. We will go through the 3 different options I talked about before. First, we'll go to logical deletion. In this case, I'm showing you a Snowflake environment where a user named Jasmine Glover, who's a loan officer, you can see her ID number here, 6088492, is in the customer table. As we said before, we can monitor any access to data. And what you can see here is that in the SecuPi management console, we can see this user logged in, accessed 10 rows, and this is the data that the user seen. As you can see, Jasmine Glover is part of that, a loan officer, that data was accessed. Now, that user Jasmine is asking to be forgotten. In this case, what we are doing is we are adding a value, this value 6088492, into a table called customer RTBF. Now, let's see what we need to do in the SecuPi policies in order to make those records disappear. In this case, we have data access to a database, and we're going to constrain a SQL statement. So you can see here, if a user is going to customer clear view, we're going to change the where clause to say select star from customer clear where ID is not in the customer RTBF table. If I'll scroll down a little bit, you can see I can do it for multiple tables and return back the same table name back to the view. So for the user, they don't even know that they're actually looking at a view. They think they're looking at a real table. This is all being done behind the scene. You can also see here below that I can classify this as whatever I want. In this case, I classified it as right to be forgotten, and I'm telling the rule that the flow will continue. So now I'm running the same query again, and as you can see, there is no loan officer. We can't see the ID 6088492 anymore. So let's see how do we see the same access now within the SecuPi console. So first you can see that this request came from a user named Kenneth from a specific IP with a role of finance. The request was to select the top 10 from customer clear ordered by ID. But you can see here on the right hand side is that we did a rewrite to the query. So the rewrite was select top 10 from customer clear by ID to customer clear view with select from customer clear where ID is not in select from the right to be forgotten. And if we scroll down, we see some sample data, and again there is no loan officer here anymore because that user asked to be forgotten. So again, the data is still in the database, but the user cannot see that data. It doesn't matter if it will come from the Snowflake dashboard, if it will come from a database tool, or if it will come from an analytical tool such as Tableau or Power BI. It will all behave the same. So that was our soft deletion. Now I'm going to disable this rule. So here you see enable disable. I'm going to disable the rule and save it in order for us to see the same loan officer again, and now we'll be able to go to the next use case. Our next use case is physical anonymization and physical deletion. Both are being done on the database. If you remember, in number one, we didn't touch the database. We just rewrote the SQL query. We didn't need to know anything about the database because we didn't change the data. The data stays the same in the database. We just changed the way the user can see that data. So now I can see the same loan officer again, Jasmine Glover, with ID 6088492. She's back in the database because we disabled the rule. Now I'm going to configure in the SecuPi console the data subject attributes. That attribute will tell me how do I find that specific user that needs to be deleted. Then I'm going to define the data source. How do I connect to the database in which I need to mask or delete the data? Now I configure the DSAR flow. The DSAR flow tells me what databases are going to be part of this specific process. And if I'm going to have an API call directly, or if I'm going to integrate with integrations such as BigID or OneTrust. In this case, I selected direct flow. So we will just work with an API to us to delete records. Lastly, on this flow, I'm going to configure an email template for the user, for the data privacy officer to confirm what happened. Now I need to define a retention policy. A retention policy can either just say how long do I retain records until they're being deleted, but it will also comply with that right to be forgotten API call. So in this case, I created two policies that are going on customer clear with specific columns. The first one will trigger within 5 seconds, and the second one will trigger within 30 seconds of the job being done. So again, the loan officer Jasmine with ID 6088492 is in the Snowflake database, in the customer database. I'm going to activate an API call. The API call in this case is just a curl command, and the important part is the subject ID. Subject ID is the partner ID that I showed you before, and that partner ID is 6088492. That will trigger. Once we trigger that API call, it will answer that everything is good, so no errors on this one. Now all we need to do is wait for 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, the first retention policy will start working. So you can see here that after 5 seconds, we masked the data. That means the ID stayed because the ID is the primary key. It will never change if it's still there, but everything else is changed. So we put zeros and we put a old date. So everything is now changed within the database. If I'll keep refreshing the data here, you'll see that after 30 seconds, the second retention policy will start kicking in. And the second retention policy is really deleting that user. So that user, Jasmine, the loan officer, is no longer in the database. That record is deleted for good. That concludes our demo and presentation around data privacy compliance automation with simplified zero-code deletion. Thank you very much for joining and listening. You can find more information in secupi.com and in our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@secupi. Thank you very much.